Lieutenant Sarah Vale stepped through the entrance of Fort Braxton's Advanced Combat Training Facility, her boots echoing against polished concrete as morning sunlight streamed through industrial windows. The familiar scent of equipment oil and sweat filled her nostrils while she surveyed the sprawling indoor complex that housed obstacle courses designed to break the strongest soldiers. Captain Morrison emerged from his office, clipboard in hand, an expression already dismissive as his eyes traced Vale's compact 5'4" frame. Behind him, Staff Sergeants Kowalski and Chin exchanged knowing glances that spoke of predetermined conclusions about the slight woman before them. "Lieutenant Vale, reporting for evaluation exercise as ordered, sir," she announced with crisp military precision that seemed to amuse Morrison more than impress him. Morrison's laugh carried across the cavernous space as he gestured toward the obstacle course that dominated the facility center. "Right, the evaluation. We've got a special course set up to test regular personnel limits. Should be interesting to see how you handle real physical demands." Vale's trained eyes immediately cataloged the modifications scattered throughout the course. Standard concrete barriers have been replaced with unforgiving steel structures that would punish any mistake. The climbing walls stretched 20 feet into the air instead of the regulation 15, their surfaces gleaming with fresh welding marks. The mud crawl pit had been excavated to 4 feet deep, creating a treacherous bog that would exhaust even experienced soldiers. "This course looks different from standard specifications," Vale observed quietly, her tone carrying no accusation despite the obvious safety violations. Kowalski stepped forward with a grin that failed to reach his eyes. "Combat doesn't follow specifications, Lieutenant. We believe in preparing our people for reality instead of pampered training exercises." Chin nodded his agreement while adjusting camera equipment positioned to capture every angle of the course. "This evaluation gets recorded for personnel placement decisions. Command wants to see what everyone's really capable of when things get difficult." Morrison's satisfaction became palpable as he outlined the exercise parameters. "No time limits, but we expect completion within reasonable bounds. The course tests endurance, problem-solving, and mental toughness under progressively challenging conditions." When Vale requested standard safety equipment, Morrison's dismissal came swift and final. "Real combat doesn't provide safety nets, Lieutenant. We train like we fight, and fighting means accepting risk." The three men shared another look that confirmed their collective certainty about the outcome they expected. Vale recognized the dynamic immediately. They had constructed this evaluation not to test her capabilities, but to manufacture her failure through deliberate sabotage disguised as enhanced difficulty. "I understand the parameters, sir," Vale replied with the same steady composure that had carried her through countless genuine challenges. "Request permission to begin when ready." Morrison checked his watch with theatrical precision. "Cameras rolling, course is set, and we're all eager to see what you can accomplish." "Whenever you're prepared, Lieutenant." Vale approached the starting line while Morrison, Kowalski, and Chin positioned themselves at observation points throughout the facility. Their conversations carried undertones of anticipated entertainment as they discussed how quickly they expected her to quit or require rescue from their intentionally dangerous modifications. She completed her final equipment check with methodical efficiency, adjusting her uniform and ensuring her boots were properly secured. The course stretched before her like a gauntlet designed by people who had confused cruelty with training, but Vale's expression remained unchanged as she prepared to accept their challenge. "Beginning evaluation exercise now," she announced to the cameras and observers, then moved toward the first obstacle with the measured confidence of someone who understood exactly what game was being played and had already decided how it would end. The exercise commenced with a 400-meter sprint while carrying a 60-pound pack that Morrison had personally loaded with extra weight plates. Vale's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm she had perfected during countless training runs, her legs moving with efficient precision across the facility's rubberized track. When she crossed the quarter-mile marker, Kowalski checked his stopwatch with obvious disappointment at her regulation completion time. "Lucky start," Chen muttered while adjusting the camera angle to capture her approach to the rope climb station. The climbing rope hung 30 feet from ceiling anchors, its surface worn from years of use by soldiers testing their upper body strength. Vale grasped the rope and began her ascent using textbook technique, but immediately noticed the fibers felt different under her palms. Chen had selected a rope with multiple frayed sections that could snap under stress, positioning the weakest point precisely where climbers would grip during the most difficult portion of their ascent. Vale adapted her climbing technique without comment, distributing her weight more carefully and avoiding the compromised sections while maintaining steady upward progress. Her modification went unnoticed by the observers who expected the rope to fail catastrophically and end the evaluation before reaching more expensive obstacles. Morrison's radio crackled to life as Vale completed the climb and moved toward the wall scaling section. Control, we need equipment adjustment on obstacles 7 through 9. Increase difficulty parameters as discussed. The 20-foot wall loomed before her with handholds that appeared regulation from ground level but had been deliberately loosened to fail under full body weight. Vale tested each grip point briefly before committing her weight, a precaution that allowed her to identify unstable holds and select alternate routes up the vertical surface. Her methodical approach frustrated Chun, who had expected multiple falls to injure her before she could adapt. She's being overly cautious, Kowalski observed to Morrison while Vale crested the wall and prepared for descent. Maybe we need to encourage faster movement through the remaining sections. The mud crawl segment originally measured 50 meters of low-profile movement through viscous terrain designed to exhaust soldiers through sustained physical effort. Without warning or announcement, Morrison extended the course to 100 meters by opening additional sections that doubled the required distance while maintaining the same 4-foot depth that forced complete submersion. Vale entered the expanded mud pit with the same steady pace she had maintained throughout the evaluation, her body position optimized to minimize drag while maximizing forward progress. The modified distance meant significantly increased exposure to the thick mud that clung to her uniform and equipment, but her breathing never shifted from the controlled pattern that indicated proper conditioning and mental preparation. 30 minutes into the evaluation, Morrison's frustration became visible as Vale emerged from the mud section covered in brown sludge, but showing no signs of exhaustion or distress. Her completion times remained within acceptable parameters, despite the sabotaged equipment and extended obstacles that should have caused multiple failures. Equipment malfunction on her gear, Morrison announced to the observers while gesturing toward Vale's performance. We'll need to make adjustments to ensure accurate assessment of her capabilities under realistic conditions. Kowalski and Chun gathered around Morrison for a whispered conference that centered on their growing concern about Vale's unexpected competence. The evaluation had been designed to manufacture failure through progressively dangerous challenges, but Vale's methodical approach and technical proficiency were overcoming obstacles that had defeated much larger and stronger soldiers. Final obstacles need to be more challenging, Chin suggested while reviewing the recorded footage of Vale's performance. She's gotten lucky so far, but luck runs out when the difficulty increases significantly. Morrison nodded his agreement and reached for his radio to coordinate the modifications that would ensure the evaluation ended with the failure they required. Make the final section more realistic. Combat doesn't allow for safety margins, and neither should our assessment of personnel capabilities. Vale approached the cargo net climbing structure that represented the evaluation's culminating challenge, her movements still precise despite the accumulated fatigue from the extended course. Morrison's team prepared their final sabotage, while cameras captured every moment of what they expected to be the spectacular failure that would justify their predetermined conclusions about her unsuitability for advanced training assignments. The trap had been set with deliberate care, but Vale's performance had already demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their expectations and threatened their comfortable assumptions about physical limitations based on appearance. The final obstacle towered 25 feet above the facility floor, a cargo net climbing structure that normally provided multiple safety anchor points to prevent catastrophic falls. Morrison's modifications had reduced the anchor cables to a single release mechanism that Chun controlled from his observation position, creating a death trap disguised as a standard training exercise. Vale approached the base of the structure while Morrison positioned himself where the cameras would capture the clearest angle of her anticipated failure. His satisfaction showed plainly as he gave Chun the subtle hand signal they had rehearsed to coordinate the cable release at maximum height, ensuring maximum impact when she fell. "Take your time climbing, Lieutenant," Morrison called out with false encouragement. "We want to see your technique at altitude, where mistakes become more costly." The cargo net felt solid under Vale's hands as she began her ascent, each section of rope properly tensioned to support climbing soldiers during legitimate training exercises. Her technique remained textbook perfect as she progressed upward, weight distributed evenly across multiple contact points while maintaining 3 points of contact at all times for maximum stability. Morrison tracked her progress with growing anticipation, his radio ready to signal Chun when Vale reached the optimal height for their sabotage. At 15 feet, her position offered sufficient fall distance to cause serious injury. At 20 feet, the impact would likely end her military career. At 25 feet, the concrete floor below promised devastating consequences. Vale crested the top of the structure and paused momentarily to survey the facility below, her position now directly above the hardest section of concrete flooring where previous training accidents had left permanent stains. Morrison's signal came swift and decisive, a sharp gesture that Chun acknowledged with immediate action. The safety cable released with a metallic snap that echoed through the facility as anchor points failed simultaneously, sending Vale plummeting 25 feet toward the unforgiving surface below. Her fall seemed to unfold in slow motion as Morrison, Kowalski, and Chun watched their sabotage achieve exactly the catastrophic result they had engineered through careful planning and deliberate equipment failure. Vale struck the concrete with sickening impact, her legs taking the full force of the fall as her body crumpled against the floor. The sound of bones breaking carried clearly across the facility, twin snaps that confirmed the severe damage Morrison's team had inflicted through their calculated assault disguised as training evaluation. Medical personnel started forward from their standby position, but Morrison waved them back with authoritative gestures. "Let's see what she's made of before we intervene." Real combat doesn't provide immediate medical support, and this evaluation needs to test her response to actual injury. Vale lay motionless on the concrete, while Morrison approached the cameras to ensure they captured his satisfied expression and the successful conclusion of their manufactured accident. Kowalski and Chun exchanged congratulatory looks that celebrated their achievement in breaking the stubborn lieutenant who had refused to fail on their earlier obstacles. 30 seconds passed in complete silence as Vale remained still, her legs twisted at unnatural angles that confirmed multiple fractures from the impact. Morrison began composing his incident report that would blame equipment failure and poor climbing technique for the unfortunate accident that ended her evaluation. Then Vale's eyes opened. The transformation in her expression erased every trace of the pain that should have rendered her unconscious from shock and trauma. Where moments before lay an injured soldier requiring immediate medical attention, now something entirely different looked back at Morrison with cold calculation that made his satisfied smile falter. Vale's hands moved to the concrete beside her torso as she began the process of rolling onto her stomach despite the obvious damage to both legs. Her movements carried precision that spoke of training far beyond anything Morrison's facility could provide, techniques designed for survival under impossible circumstances. "Exercise is over, Lieutenant," Morrison announced with less confidence than he had shown moments before. "Medical will handle your situation from here." Vale ignored him completely as she settled into position and began pulling herself forward using only her arms, her shattered legs dragging uselessly behind her as she started the impossible journey toward the finish line that lay 200 meters across the facility floor. Morrison's trap had succeeded in breaking her legs, but something far more dangerous than a regular soldier had just been unleashed in his training facility. Vale's movement across the concrete floor defied every expectation Morrison had constructed about human responses to catastrophic injury. Her technique demonstrated training that transformed what should have been helpless crawling into efficient forward progress. Each pull of her arms calculated to maximize distance, while minimizing energy expenditure despite the useless weight of her shattered legs. "Stop this immediately," Morrison commanded with authority that had cowed countless soldiers throughout his career. "The exercise is terminated. Medical personnel will transport you for proper treatment." Vale's response came without pause in her methodical advance toward the finish line that lay 150 meters ahead. Her breathing remained controlled in patterns that suggested specialized training for operating under extreme physical stress, techniques that regular soldiers never encountered during standard military preparation. Chin approached from his observation position with intention to physically halt her progress, but stopped abruptly when Vale's voice cut through the facility's ambient noise. "Do not touch me." The words carried authority that made Chin's forward movement falter as something in her tone triggered recognition of danger that his conscious mind couldn't identify. Kowalski watched from his position near the equipment storage as Vale covered another 10 meters, her trail marked by blood that seeped from compound fractures but failed to slow her relentless advance. "Her breathing's wrong," he observed to Morrison with growing unease. "People in shock don't maintain that kind of respiratory control." Morrison attempted to stop the camera recording that continued capturing Vale's impossible demonstration, but the equipment had been locked into continuous operation mode that prevented interruption without proper authorization codes. Every moment of her crawl was being preserved as evidence of something that challenged his understanding of human physical limitations. Vale's technique became more apparent as she settled into a rhythm that utilized specific muscle groups while protecting her core from unnecessary strain. Her arm movements followed patterns that suggested extensive practice in scenarios that regular military training never addressed, specialized skills that transformed her broken body into an instrument of pure determination. "Get base security," Morrison ordered Chun, while his satisfaction transformed into concern about consequences he hadn't anticipated. "Clear all unauthorized personnel from this facility immediately." The distance markers along the facility floor showed Vale's steady progress as she reached the 50-meter point, 1/4 of the way to her objective despite injuries that should have rendered forward movement impossible. Her pace never varied from the efficient rhythm she had established, treating the journey like a technical problem requiring methodical solution rather than an emergency requiring immediate medical intervention. Kowalski's radio crackled with incoming transmissions as word began spreading through base communications about the extraordinary event occurring at the training facility. "Control, we're getting multiple requests for information about the situation at Building 7. Personnel are asking permission to observe." Morrison's attempts to maintain control over the situation faltered as Vale demonstrated capabilities that existed far outside normal parameters for injury response. Her crawl had become a masterclass in survival techniques that suggested training backgrounds Morrison had never encountered during his career evaluating standard military personnel. "She's covered 75 meters," Chin reported with amazement that replaced his earlier confidence. "At this rate, she'll reach the finish line within 2 hours despite multiple compound fractures." Vale's blood trail marked her route across the concrete as she continued her impossible journey. Each meter of progress challenging Morrison's assumptions about human limitations and raising questions about the true identity of the soldier he had attempted to break through calculated sabotage. The trap had succeeded in shattering her legs, but something far more formidable than anticipated had emerged from the wreckage of his carefully planned evaluation. Sergeant Rodriguez arrived at Building 7 after monitoring radio chatter that described an unusual training incident requiring immediate attention from multiple departments. His background in communications had taught him to recognize when routine exercises transformed into situations that demanded higher-level involvement, and the fragmented reports suggested something unprecedented was occurring at Morrison's facility. Colonel Patterson received the first official notification while reviewing personnel files in his office, a brief call that mentioned equipment failure and possible injury during evaluation exercises. The vague details triggered his instinct for thorough investigation, particularly when involving training accidents that seemed to occur with suspicious frequency under Morrison's supervision. Rodriguez entered the facility to discover Vale at the 100-meter mark of her impossible journey, her methodical crawling technique immediately recognizable from advanced combat survival courses he had witnessed during special operations training rotations. The precision of her movement patterns and controlled breathing indicated specialized preparation that existed far beyond standard military curricula. Who authorized spectators for this exercise? Morrison demanded when Rodriguez approached the observation area, his authority undermined by sweat that betrayed growing anxiety about losing control over the situation. Base communications received emergency traffic, Rodriguez replied while studying Vale's technique with professional interest. This crawling method follows SEER protocols for movement after catastrophic injury. Where did a regular personnel officer learn advanced survival techniques? Patterson's review of Vale's personnel file revealed discrepancies that warranted immediate investigation through classified databases requiring higher security clearance. Her training background showed gaps that suggested deliberate omission of sensitive information, patterns consistent with personnel operating undercover assignments or special operations rotations. 3 additional officers arrived independently after Rodriguez contacted colleagues who specialized in evaluating unusual training situations. Captain Williams from Military Police, Major Thompson from Medical Services, and Lieutenant Commander Harris from Naval Liaison each responded to requests for professional consultation about the extraordinary demonstration occurring under Morrison's supervision. Vale adjusted her grip technique without breaking forward momentum, a modification that optimized her efficiency for the remaining distance, while conserving energy reserves that would be critical for completing the full 200-meter course. Her adaptation demonstrated problem-solving capabilities under extreme stress that impressed the growing crowd of military professionals. Morrison's threats of disciplinary action against unauthorized personnel fell on deaf ears as the gathering expanded to include representatives from multiple base departments. His attempts to clear the facility conflicted with legitimate interest from officers whose expertise was relevant to understanding the unprecedented situation unfolding before them. She's maintained consistent pace for 90 minutes, Williams observed while timing Vale's progress with professional precision. Blood loss should have caused unconsciousness, but her vital signs appear stable based on respiratory observation. Patterson discovered that accessing Vale's complete file required clearance levels that confirmed his suspicion about her true background, extending far beyond the limited information available through standard personnel databases. The classification requirements suggested involvement with special operations units that operated under strict operational security protocols. Vale reached the 120-meter mark as her audience expanded to include senior non-commissioned officers who recognized elements of her technique from classified training programs. Their presence validated Rodriguez's assessment that standard military preparation could never produce the specialized skills being demonstrated through her impossible crawl. Harris contacted Naval Special Warfare Command through secure communications to verify suspicions about Vale's background that were becoming impossible to ignore. The response he received transformed the situation from training accident to potential assault on classified personnel operating undercover assignment, escalating the consequences Morrison faced for his deliberate sabotage beyond simple training violations into possible federal crimes against special operations personnel. Patterson's clearance codes unlocked the classified database that revealed Vale's true identity with devastating clarity from Morrison's situation. Her complete file showed Naval Special Warfare designation with SEAL qualification earned in 2019, followed by multiple classified deployments that explain the gaps in her standard personnel record and the specialized techniques she was demonstrating through her impossible crawl. The security footage review conducted by Williams provided undeniable evidence of deliberate sabotage as camera angles captured chins, intentional cable release coordinated with Morrison's hand signals. Frame-by-frame analysis showed premeditated assault disguised as equipment failure, transforming the incident from training accident into criminal conspiracy against special operations personnel. Vale approached the 150-meter mark while the crowd of observers expanded to include 30 personnel from across the base. Their professional interest focused on witnessing techniques that most would never encounter during standard military careers. Her breathing remained controlled despite blood loss that should have caused shock, demonstrating conditioning that existed far beyond normal human parameters. Patterson's discovery that Vale was operating under classified assignment meant her cover identity had been compromised through Morrison's assault, creating security implications that extended beyond simple training violations into potential breaches of special operations protocols. The revelation that a decorated Navy SEAL had been deliberately injured during routine evaluation escalated the situation into territory, requiring immediate command intervention. Morrison contacted General Hayes with fabricated reports about personnel safety incidents, his version emphasizing equipment malfunction while omitting any mention of the deliberate modifications that had caused Vale's catastrophic fall. His deception was undermined by the growing presence of witnesses who had observed enough evidence to contradict his narrative. Rodriguez completed interviews with facility personnel who confirmed that Morrison's team had modified equipment beyond safety specifications without proper authorization or documentation. Their testimony established patterns of deliberate sabotage that supported criminal charges while demonstrating institutional negligence that warranted comprehensive investigation of the entire training program. Vale's technique analysis by qualified observers revealed textbook execution of SEER survival crawling protocols designed for movement after catastrophic injury in hostile territory. The precision of her method and sustained performance indicated extensive practice under controlled conditions that prepared special operations personnel for worst-case scenarios during classified missions. Patterson's realization that Morrison had committed potential war crimes through deliberate harm to special operations personnel triggered immediate notification protocols that brought federal investigative jurisdiction into the situation. The assault on Vale constituted crimes against the military justice system that carried severe penalties, including lengthy prison sentences and permanent disgrace. Williams documented witness statements from multiple personnel who had observed the systematic equipment tampering that preceded Vale's fall, creating comprehensive evidence that would support prosecutions under both military and civilian legal systems. The testimonies painted Morrison's actions as premeditated assault rather than negligent supervision of dangerous training exercises. Vale's progress toward the 100th-of-a-5-meter mark occurred as Patterson confirmed through Naval Special Warfare Command that she was indeed operating under deep cover assignment that had been compromised through Morrison's criminal actions. Her true identity as a decorated SEAL transformed the training incident into an attack on classified personnel that warranted the highest levels of command attention. The investigation revealed that Morrison's facility had experienced 12 previous training accidents over the past 18 months, establishing patterns of dangerous practices that had been disguised as enhanced realism but actually represented systematic negligence, bordering on criminal recklessness. Vale's case provided the evidence needed to expose institutional problems that had endangered numerous personnel. Harris received confirmation from Naval Special Warfare Command that Vale's assignment required immediate protection of her operational security, meaning that her extraordinary demonstration was occurring while maintaining classified mission parameters that added layers of complexity to the unfolding crisis. Morrison had unknowingly assaulted a SEAL whose capabilities exceeded anything his training experience had prepared him to recognize or handle. General Hayes arrived by helicopter with a medical team and JAG officer after receiving Patterson's urgent briefing about the assault on special operations personnel occurring at the training facility. The rotors thundered overhead as his aircraft settled onto the landing pad, bringing the highest level of command authority to bear on Morrison's rapidly deteriorating situation. Vale reached the 1/100th of a 5-meter mark as Hayes entered the facility, her impossible journey now requiring only 25 meters more to complete the full course despite compound fractures that should have ended her movement within minutes of the fall. Her sustained performance over 2 hours demonstrated capabilities that impressed even Hayes, whose career had included oversight of the most elite military units. Patterson delivered his comprehensive briefing while Hayes observed Vale's methodical progress, explaining her SEAL background, the evidence of deliberate sabotage, and the security implications of Morrison's assault on classified personnel. The combination of criminal action and operational security breach warranted immediate intervention at the highest levels of military authority. Hayes ordered the immediate arrest of Morrison, Chun, and Kowalski for assault on special operations personnel, charges that carried federal jurisdiction and severe penalties under military justice codes. Military Police Captain Williams executed the arrests, while Hayes personally ensured that all evidence was preserved for prosecution under both military and civilian legal systems. Vale's crawling technique had maintained consistency for 100 minutes despite blood loss that would have incapacitated normal personnel, her breathing patterns and movement efficiency demonstrating training that existed at the pinnacle of military preparation. Medical personnel monitored her vital signs remotely while respecting her determination to complete the course under her own power. Morrison's attempt to destroy training records was intercepted by military police who had anticipated his efforts to eliminate evidence of the systematic equipment tampering that had enabled his assault on Vale. His destruction of documents added obstruction of justice to the growing list of charges that would end his military career and result in lengthy prison sentences. The surveillance footage showed Morrison's satisfied expression as Vale fell, providing visual evidence of premeditated intent that transformed his actions from negligent supervision into calculated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. The cameras had captured every detail needed to support prosecution for attempted murder of a decorated Navy SEAL. Vale crossed the finish line with the same controlled precision she had maintained throughout her impossible journey, completing the full 200-meter course despite injuries that medical experts confirmed should have rendered movement impossible. Her achievement represented the most extraordinary demonstration of mental toughness and physical conditioning that Hayes had witnessed during his distinguished career. Hayes approached Vale as she reached the completion point, his presence representing formal acknowledgement from the highest levels of command that her performance had transcended training exercise to become legendary demonstration of special operations capabilities. The respect in his bearing reflected recognition of achievements that would become part of military history. "That's enough, Lieutenant," Hayes announced while kneeling beside Vale with the deference appropriate for addressing decorated special operations personnel who had just completed an impossible mission under circumstances that revealed the true meaning of military excellence. "You've proven everything that needed proving." Morrison's face transformed as he realized the magnitude of his error in assaulting a Navy SEAL whose capabilities and connections extended far beyond anything his limited experience had prepared him to understand. His career, freedom, and reputation were forfeit through actions that had targeted one of the military's most elite personnel operating under classified assignment. The JAG officer formally documented the charges against Morrison's team, while Hayes coordinated with Naval Special Warfare Command to ensure Vale received appropriate medical treatment, without compromising her operational security. The situation required delicate handling to balance justice for the assault with protection of classified mission parameters that remained active despite the compromise of her cover identity. Vale's completion of the course despite catastrophic injury established new benchmarks for human performance under extreme conditions, providing training material that would benefit future special operations candidates while demonstrating the extraordinary capabilities that justified the most rigorous selection and preparation programs in military service. Hayes knelt beside Vale at the finish line, where she had completed her impossible journey, his voice carrying the respect reserved for the most elite military personnel as he addressed her by the call sign that revealed her true status. Trident 7, you are relieved of this exercise. Mission parameters have been exceeded under extraordinary circumstances. Vale's response came in the formal military language that confirmed her special operations background. Her report delivered with precision despite the medical emergency that surrounded her completion of the 200-meter crawl. Sir, Lieutenant Vale, reporting mission completion. Course traversed as directed despite equipment failure and injury sustained during execution. Morrison's expression transformed as the significance of Hayes addressing Vale by SEAL call sign penetrated his understanding. The realization that he had assaulted a decorated Navy SEAL, replacing his earlier confidence with horror at the magnitude of his criminal actions. His sabotage had targeted one of the military's most elite personnel, elevating his charges from simple assault to federal crimes against Special Operations Forces. The medical team began emergency treatment while maintaining the dignity appropriate for a wounded warrior who had just demonstrated extraordinary courage under impossible circumstances. Their professional admiration was evident as they worked to stabilize injuries that should have prevented any movement, let alone the sustained performance Vale had maintained for over 90 minutes. Hayes announced to the assembled crowd that they had witnessed exceptional courage under circumstances that would challenge the strongest personnel, his words formally acknowledging Vale's achievement while establishing the historical significance of her performance. You have observed what it means to embody the warrior ethos under conditions that test the absolute limits of human capability. The JAG officer presented formal charges against Morrison for assault on Special Operations personnel, charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences under federal law, designed to protect classified military assets from deliberate harm. Morrison's actions constituted serious crimes against national security personnel whose capabilities were essential to military readiness and operational success. Vale requested that the training footage be preserved for instructional purposes at SEER schools, her focus on contributing to future training despite her critical medical condition demonstrating the service-oriented mindset that characterized Special Operations personnel. Her ordeal would benefit countless soldiers who would learn from her techniques and mental toughness. Chun and Kowalski confessed to equipment tampering under JAG, questioning that revealed the extent of their conspiracy to manufacture Vale's failure through deliberate sabotage. Their admissions provided complete evidence for prosecution while exposing institutional problems that had enabled systematic abuse of personnel under the guise of enhanced training realism. Hayes ordered a comprehensive investigation of the training facility's previous accidents, directing that all incidents over the past 2 years be reviewed for evidence of similar sabotage or negligent practices that had endangered personnel. Vale's case had exposed problems that extended far beyond a single evaluation exercise into systematic institutional failure. The revelation of Vale's identity transformed the gathering from accident response to recognition ceremony as personnel realized they had witnessed a legendary demonstration by one of the military's most elite operators. Her crawl would become part of Special Operations history, taught to future candidates as an example of mental toughness under extreme adversity. Morrison was escorted to the base brig in restraints that symbolized his transition from authority figure to federal criminal. His career ended through actions that had revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the personnel under his supervision. His assault on Vale had exposed character flaws that disqualified him from any position of responsibility over military personnel. Hayes coordinated with Naval Special Warfare Command to ensure Vale's medical care met the standards required for Special Operations personnel while protecting the operational security that remained important despite the compromise of her cover identity. Her treatment would reflect her status as a national asset whose capabilities warranted the highest levels of medical attention. The crowd dispersed with new understanding of the extraordinary individuals who served in special operations roles. Their witness to Vale's impossible achievement, providing insight into capabilities that most military personnel would never encounter during standard service. Her demonstration had educated an entire base about the meaning of elite military performance under the most challenging circumstances. Emergency surgery became critical as medical evaluation revealed the extent of Vale's injuries. Multiple compound fractures requiring immediate intervention to save her legs from permanent damage or amputation. The orthopedic team worked with urgency that reflected both the severity of her condition and her status as special operations personnel whose physical capabilities were essential to national security missions. Naval Special Warfare Command dispatched their top medical representative to oversee Vale's treatment, ensuring that every resource available to the military's most elite units was applied to her recovery. The specialized care reflected recognition that her capabilities represented years of training investment that warranted extraordinary efforts to preserve her operational effectiveness. Morrison was confined to the base brig pending court-martial proceedings that would determine his sentence for aggravated assault on special operations personnel, charges that carried potential decades in federal prison. His cell provided ample time to contemplate the magnitude of his error in targeting a decorated Navy SEAL whose achievements he had never bothered to investigate. Vale's crawl distance was officially measured at exactly 200 meters with documented time of 93 minutes, establishing new benchmarks for human performance under catastrophic injury that would be studied by medical professionals and military trainers for decades. Her achievement redefined understanding of mental toughness and physical conditioning at the highest levels of military service. The medical prognosis indicated 8 to 12 months recovery time with extensive physical therapy required to restore full function to her damaged legs, a timeline that reflected the severity of injuries that should have ended her military career. The doctors expressed amazement that she had maintained consciousness through blood loss and trauma that would have incapacitated personnel with twice her physical mass. Hayes ordered complete overhaul of the training facility's safety protocols, implementing new oversight requirements that would prevent future sabotage while ensuring that legitimate training maintained appropriate challenge levels. Morrison's assault had exposed institutional vulnerabilities that warranted systematic correction to protect all personnel from similar abuse. Chun and Kowalski received dishonorable discharge proceedings that would end their military careers, while civilian criminal charges added potential prison sentences for their roles in the conspiracy against Vale. Their confessions had provided complete evidence for prosecution while demonstrating the breadth of Morrison's influence over subordinates who had enabled his criminal actions. Vale's performance became required case study material at SEER schools where her techniques and mental conditioning would be analyzed to improve survival training for future special operations candidates. Her impossible crawl represented the pinnacle of training effectiveness that validated the most rigorous preparation programs in military service. The medical team confirmed that Vale had maintained consciousness through blood loss that would incapacitate most personnel, her vital signs remaining stable despite trauma that should have caused immediate shock and unconsciousness. Her conditioning demonstrated the effectiveness of special operations preparation that enabled performance under conditions that challenge basic assumptions about human limitations. Hayes initiated investigation of all training accidents at Morrison's facility over the previous 2 years, directing comprehensive review that would determine whether other personnel had been subjected to similar sabotage disguised as enhanced training difficulty. Vale's case had provided the evidence needed to expose institutional problems that may have affected numerous soldiers. The surgical team worked through the night to repair fractures that had been complicated by the sustained movement during Vale's crawl, her determination to complete the course having caused additional damage that made reconstruction more challenging. Their efforts reflected commitment to preserving the capabilities of personnel whose training represented irreplaceable national assets. Naval Special Warfare Command classified Vale's performance as exemplary conduct under extraordinary circumstances, formal recognition that would become part of her permanent record, while providing documentation for potential decorations acknowledging her courage under impossible conditions. Her crawl had transcended training exercise to become demonstration of the warrior ethos at its highest expression. The investigation expanded to include review of Morrison's entire career, examining whether his pattern of dangerous training practices had endangered other personnel during previous assignments. Vale's assault had revealed character defects that raised questions about his fitness for military service throughout his career rather than isolated incident of poor judgment during a single evaluation exercise. 3 months after the incident, Vale began physical therapy at Walter Reed Medical Center, where specialists in military rehabilitation worked to restore function to legs that had been shattered through Morrison's deliberate sabotage. Her determination during recovery sessions impressed therapists who had treated countless wounded warriors but had never encountered someone who approached rehabilitation with the same intensity she had demonstrated during her impossible crawl. Morrison's court-martial concluded with conviction on all charges of aggravated assault against Special Operations personnel, resulting in a sentence of 5 years in federal military prison that effectively ended his career and destroyed his reputation. The proceedings had revealed the premeditated nature of his attack on Vale, demonstrating criminal intent that warranted severe punishment under military justice codes. Vale's training footage became mandatory viewing at SEER schools, where instructors used her performance to demonstrate mental resilience techniques that enabled survival under catastrophic circumstances. Her crawl provided real-world validation of training methods that prepared Special Operations personnel for worst-case scenarios during classified missions behind enemy lines. The physical therapy team expressed amazement at Vale's pain tolerance and commitment to recovery exercises that would challenge healthy personnel, her approach to rehabilitation reflecting the same methodical precision she had applied to completing the sabotaged obstacle course. Her progress exceeded medical predictions as she consistently achieved benchmarks ahead of projected timelines. Hayes' investigation revealed 12 previous training accidents at Morrison's facility over 18 months, establishing patterns of negligent and dangerous practices that had been disguised as enhanced realism, but actually represented systematic abuse of personnel under his supervision. Vale's case had provided the evidence needed to expose institutional problems that had endangered numerous soldiers. Vale achieved assisted walking after 4 months of intensive therapy, a milestone that doctors characterized as miraculous recovery given the severity of her compound fractures and the additional damage caused by her sustained crawling immediately after the initial injury. Her rehabilitation demonstrated the same extraordinary capabilities that had enabled her impossible performance on the day of Morrison's assault. Chun received a 3-year civilian sentence for conspiracy and assault, while Kowalski was sentenced to 2 years for his participation in the sabotage that had nearly ended Vale's military career. Their punishments reflected the serious nature of their crimes against Special Operations personnel while serving as deterrent to future abuse of authority in training environments. The training facility was redesignated as a safety research center focused on developing protocols that would prevent future incidents while maintaining appropriate challenge levels for military preparation. Morrison's assault had catalyzed comprehensive reform of training oversight that would protect personnel from similar abuse throughout the military system. Vale's medical case became study material for military physicians treating combat injuries. Her recovery techniques and pain management strategies providing insights that would benefit future wounded warriors facing similar challenges. Her rehabilitation demonstrated methods that maximized healing while maintaining the mental toughness essential for return to active duty. Naval Special Warfare Command began preliminary evaluation of Vale's fitness for return to operational status, recognizing that her extraordinary performance during the assault and recovery had validated her capabilities rather than diminishing them. Her request to resume SEAL operations reflected commitment to service that transcended personal injury and demonstrated the warrior mindset that defined special operations personnel. The investigation of Morrison's career revealed additional incidents of questionable training practices at previous assignments, suggesting that his assault on Vale represented the culmination of pattern behavior rather than isolated poor judgment. His conviction had prevented future abuse while exposing institutional vulnerabilities that warranted systematic correction. Vale's case established new protocols for protecting special operations personnel operating undercover assignments, ensuring that their true capabilities and status would be recognized when necessary to prevent abuse by supervisors who lacked appropriate security clearances. Her sacrifice had improved protections for classified personnel throughout the military system. The recovery timeline that had initially projected 12 months was reduced to 8 months as Vale's progress exceeded all medical expectations. Her determination to return to active duty driving rehabilitation efforts that amazed healthcare professionals. Her performance during recovery demonstrated the same extraordinary capabilities that had enabled her legendary crawl across Morrison's facility floor. 8 months after Morrison's assault, Vale passed comprehensive physical evaluation for return to SEAL operations. Her recovery, defying medical predictions that had suggested permanent disability from the compound fractures inflicted through deliberate sabotage. The evaluation board expressed amazement at her restoration of full mobility and strength, capabilities that validated the extraordinary conditioning demonstrated during her impossible crawl. Morrison began serving his 5-year sentence at the military detention facility in Kansas. His confinement representing justice for the premeditated assault on special operations personnel that had nearly ended Vale's career. His fellow inmates learned quickly to avoid the disgraced former captain whose crimes against a decorated Navy SEAL had earned universal contempt throughout the military prison system. Vale's crawl became mandatory training material for all special operations candidates. Her performance analyzed frame by frame to extract lessons about mental toughness and survival techniques under catastrophic circumstances. The footage provided real-world demonstration of principles that SEER instructors had taught theoretically, giving concrete example of how proper training enabled impossible achievements under extreme adversity. The comprehensive review of training facility incidents led to Department of Defense-wide implementation of safety protocol reforms that would prevent future abuse while maintaining appropriate challenge levels for military preparation. Morrison's systematic negligence had catalyzed changes that improved protections for personnel throughout the military training system. Vale returned to SEAL Team 7 with ceremony that recognized her extraordinary service and sacrifice, receiving the Navy Cross for demonstrating exceptional courage under circumstances that had tested the absolute limits of human capability. Her decoration acknowledged not only her impossible crawl, but also her commitment to completing the mission despite deliberate assault by her own chain of command. Rodriguez received promotion to Master Sergeant in recognition of his professional investigation that had exposed Morrison's crimes and protected Vale from additional harm. His advocacy for training safety reforms earned respect throughout the base as an example of non-commissioned officers who prioritize personnel welfare over institutional convenience. Patterson was awarded the Bronze Star for his thorough investigation and evidence preservation that had enabled successful prosecution of Morrison's conspiracy, his professional competence ensuring that justice was served while protecting the operational security of classified personnel. His work had prevented cover-up attempts while maintaining appropriate protection for special operations assets. Vale's recovery timeline established new medical baselines for special operations rehabilitation programs. Her techniques and mental approaches being studied to improve treatment for future wounded warriors facing similar challenges. Her case provided evidence that proper conditioning and mindset could overcome injuries that conventional medicine considered permanently disabling. The Department of Defense implemented the Vale Protocol requiring independent safety monitoring for all special operations training exercises, ensuring that personnel with Morrison's character defects could never again abuse their authority to endanger elite military assets. Her sacrifice had created systematic protections that would benefit countless future service members. Naval Special Warfare Command classified Vale's performance as exemplary demonstration of the warrior ethos under extraordinary circumstances, formal recognition that became part of military leadership training at the highest levels. Her crawl represented the pinnacle of what proper preparation could achieve when combined with unbreakable determination and commitment to mission completion. Morrison's investigation revealed that his pattern of dangerous training practices had affected 17 personnel over 6 years at 3 different installations, demonstrating that Vale's assault was part of systematic abuse that had been enabled by insufficient oversight of training programs. His conviction had prevented future incidents while exposing institutional vulnerabilities that warranted comprehensive reform. The training facility transformation into a safety research center produced protocols that balanced appropriate challenge with personnel protection, ensuring that legitimate training could continue without the deliberate hazards that Morrison had introduced through his criminal negligence. Vale's case had catalyzed improvements that enhanced both safety and effectiveness of military preparation programs. Vale's return to active duty represented complete vindication of her capabilities and commitment to service, her performance during recovery having demonstrated the same extraordinary qualities that had enabled her legendary crawl. Her presence in SEAL Team 7 inspired teammates who understood that they served alongside someone who had redefined the meaning of courage under impossible circumstances, proving that proper training and unbreakable will could overcome any obstacle that enemies or circumstances could create. 2 years after her impossible crawl, Vale led classified SEAL operations in locations that remained protected by operational security, her legendary performance having earned respect throughout special operations communities worldwide. Her return to active duty had demonstrated complete recovery from injuries that should have ended her military career, validating the extraordinary conditioning and mental toughness that defined elite military personnel. Morrison continued serving his sentence in military detention, his reputation destroyed permanently through crimes that had targeted one of the nation's most elite warriors. Fellow inmates learned quickly that his assault on a decorated Navy SEAL had earned universal contempt, his isolation reflecting the military community's judgment about personnel who betrayed the trust placed in training supervisors. The training facility incident became mandatory case study material at military academies throughout the world, Vale's performance analyzed by leadership instructors who used her crawl to demonstrate the warrior ethos under impossible circumstances. Her achievement provided concrete example of what proper preparation could accomplish when combined with unbreakable determination and commitment to mission completion regardless of personal cost. Fort Braxton commemorated Vale's 200-meter crawl with a bronze marker that acknowledged her extraordinary demonstration of courage under circumstances that had tested the absolute limits of human capability. The memorial served as permanent reminder that underestimating personnel based on appearance could lead to catastrophic misjudgments about their true capabilities and background. Military personnel throughout the service learned about respecting all colleagues regardless of their apparent limitations, understanding that exceptional capabilities often existed beneath unremarkable exteriors. Vale's case had taught an entire generation of soldiers that assumptions based on physical appearance could blind supervisors to the extraordinary individuals serving under their command. Vale continued active SEAL operations with identity protected, but legend widely known throughout special operations communities, her performance having established benchmarks for mental toughness that would inspire future generations of elite warriors. Her crawl had become part of military folklore that demonstrated what humans could achieve when properly trained and absolutely committed to mission success despite impossible obstacles. Here in Portland, Oregon, many of us face our own challenges that test our limits. Have you ever had a moment where you had to dig deeper than you thought possible to overcome something that seemed impossible? Vale's story reminds us that the strength to continue often comes from within, waiting to be discovered when we refuse to quit. What's your experience with pushing through when everything seemed stacked against you?